David Reeves counted the cracks in his ceiling for the 347th time. The number never changed, but checking gave him something to do besides think. His apartment smelled like recycled air and old food containers. He did not care anymore. The scar tissue on his left shoulder ached when rain came to New Perth Colony. Today it ached badly. Through his small window, gray clouds gathered over the industrial district where he worked. Perfect weather for a perfect life, he thought without humor. His shift at the waste recycling center started in 2 hours. David pulled himself from the mattress on the floor. No bed frame. He had sold it 8 months ago for drinking money. The bottle collection against the wall had grown since then. He stepped over 3 empties to reach his bathroom. The mirror showed a man who looked 50 but had just turned 34. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under pale blue eyes, hair that needed cutting. The beard hid most of his face now. Good. He did not want to see himself clearly. Water from the sink ran cold for 3 minutes before warming. David splashed his face and avoided looking up again. His reflection reminded him too much of the faces from the troop carrier. His friends, his responsibility, all dead because he had survived. 2 years since the Scaran Empire orbital strike. 2 years since Sergeant David Reeves became nothing but a file number in the veteran medical system. They had given him a discharge, a small pension, and a therapist he never talked to. What good were words against the memory of burning metal and screaming voices? He dressed in the gray coveralls required for recycling work. The job demanded nothing from him except showing up and sorting garbage for 8 hours. No decisions. No leadership. No chances to fail anyone else. The supervisor barely spoke to him. Perfect. David locked his apartment and walked down 4 flights of stairs. The elevator worked, but he avoided it. Too many aliens used the elevator. New Perth had become a mixing ground for dozens of species after the war ended. The Galactic Union wanted everyone friendly now. Peace and cooperation. David wanted none of it. A Drask family lived on the 2nd floor. Tall reptilian beings with scales that changed color with emotion. Their young ones played in the hallway sometimes. David always waited until they went inside before passing. He did not hate the children specifically. He hated what they represented. The universe had taken his family and expected him to smile at theirs. The walk to the recycling center took 30 minutes through streets David knew by heart. He kept his head down and his pace quick. Fewer aliens approached him that way. Some veterans had adjusted to the new reality. They worked alongside former enemies, even made friends. David considered them traitors to the memory of everyone who died. His therapist, Dr. Patel, said his thinking showed signs of severe depression and complicated grief. She used many medical terms. David heard them all as fancy ways of saying he could not move on. She was right. He did not want to move on. Moving on meant forgetting, and forgetting meant their deaths mattered even less. The recycling center stood at the edge of the industrial zone, a massive building that processed waste from 30,000 colonists. David scanned his ID badge at the entrance. His supervisor, Briggs, nodded from the control room window. That counted as their entire interaction most days. David took his position at sorting station 7. Conveyor belts carried garbage past him for hours. He separated metals from plastics from organic waste. His hands moved automatically while his mind drifted to safer memories. Childhood on Earth, his mother's garden. Basic training before everything went wrong. The day shift ended without incident. David clocked out and checked the schedule board. Someone had called in sick for the night shift. Briggs had written his name in the empty slot. Overtime pay meant nothing to David, but working nights meant fewer people around. He accepted without complaint. The center felt different after dark. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the sorting floor. The machinery hummed louder without daytime voices to cover it. David worked alone in the vast space, which suited him fine. Around midnight, he took his break near the industrial incinerator in the back section. The heat from the furnace felt good against the damp night air. He ate a nutrition bar that tasted like cardboard and stared at nothing. A sound caught his attention. Small, high-pitched, almost like birds. But New Perth had no native birds. David stood and listened. The sound came again, definitely not mechanical. Something alive. He followed the noise past the incinerator to the loading area where damaged containers waited for destruction. One container, marked with shipping labels too burned to read, sat apart from the others. The sound came from inside it. David's training kicked in automatically. He approached carefully, checking for threats. His hand found the utility knife on his belt. The container's seal had broken partially, leaving a gap near the top. He gripped the edge and pulled. Metal groaned as the door swung open. 3 small shapes huddled in the corner. Reptilian, covered in dull brown scales no bigger than house cats. Their eyes reflected the light like mirrors. One of them made that chirping sound again. They shook from cold. David recognized them immediately. Drask, the same species that had allied with the Scaran during the war. The same species he had learned to hate with every fiber of his being. His first thought was simple. Close the door and walk away. Let the cold finish what the abandonment started. They were scheduled for incineration anyway. No one would know. No one would care. He started to push the door closed. The smallest of the 3 creatures looked up at him. Its eyes were huge in its tiny face, filled with something David recognized. Fear. Helplessness. The desperate hope that someone might care whether it lived or died. The creature reached out one small clawed hand toward him. It made a soft sound, almost questioning. The other 2 pressed against it, trying to share warmth that none of them had. David's hand froze on the door. He stood there for a long moment, fighting with himself. Everything he believed said to walk away. Everything he had lost demanded he feel nothing for these things, but something else stirred in the empty place where his heart used to be. Something he thought had died in that burning troop carrier. He did not have a name for it yet. David looked around the loading area. No cameras. No witnesses. He made a decision that surprised him even as he acted on it. He pulled off his jacket and reached into the container. The creatures tried to scramble away, but they were too weak. He wrapped them in the fabric and lifted them against his chest. They weighed almost nothing. Their scales felt cold through his shirt. One of them made a tiny clicking sound. Not aggressive, just afraid. David carried them back through the center, past his workstation, out the side exit. His apartment was a 40-minute walk. He did not think about what he was doing or why. He only knew he could not leave them to die in the cold. The rain started as he walked. He tucked the jacket tighter around his chest, keeping them dry. One of the creatures poked its head out and looked up at him. David did not look back. He just kept walking through the empty streets, carrying the last thing in the universe he ever expected to save. David's apartment door clicked shut behind him. He stood in the darkness, still holding the bundle against his chest. The creatures had stopped making noise during the walk home. For a terrible moment, he thought they might be dead already. Then one of them shifted, a small movement but alive. David let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He set the jacket carefully on his floor and turned on a lamp. Yellow light filled the small room. The 3 creatures lay tangled together, their eyes squeezed shut against the brightness. They looked worse under proper light. Thin, shaking. Patches of their scales looked dull and flaky. David had no idea what to do with them. He knew nothing about Drask biology except how to kill adult ones efficiently. That training felt useless and cruel now, staring at these small helpless things. The biggest one lifted its head and made that chirping sound again. Hungry, David guessed. He went to his kitchen area, which was just a counter and a cooling unit. Inside sat 3 expired meal packages and a half-empty bottle. Nothing that looked appropriate for baby reptiles. He grabbed a container of water and poured some into a shallow bowl. He set it near the creatures. All 3 ignored it. The middle-sized one crawled a few inches away from the others and curled into a tight ball. Not a good sign. David sat on his floor and watched them. He should call someone. Animal control. Colony services. Someone who knew what they were doing. But calling meant questions. Where did you find them? Why did you take them? What were you thinking? He had no good answers. He was not thinking. That was the point. For 2 years, thinking had only brought pain. Tonight he had acted on something else, something he did not understand yet. The smallest creature uncurled slightly and looked at him. It had markings around its eyes that made it look even younger than the others, probably the runt of the clutch. David had learned that word from nature documentaries he watched when sleep would not come. The weakest sibling often left behind. He reached out slowly. The small one flinched but did not move away. David touched its head with one finger. The scales felt like warm leather. The creature made a soft clicking sound. Not afraid. Maybe curious. Something in David's chest hurt. Not his old shoulder injury. Something deeper. He pulled his hand back. "I do not know what to feed you," he said out loud. His voice sounded strange. He had not spoken to anyone except Briggs in weeks. "I do not even know if you can understand me." The creatures stared at him with those large, reflective eyes. They probably understood nothing. But they listened, heads tilted slightly. David stood and found his old datapad buried under papers. He turned it on for the first time in months. The screen asked for updates. He ignored them and opened a search function. Drask Hatchlings care requirements. The results showed dozens of files. Most were locked behind scientific databases he could not access, but a few public articles gave basic information. He read quickly, his military training helping him sort useful facts from useless ones. Cold-blooded. That explained the shaking. They needed external heat sources, carnivorous from hatching. That explained ignoring the water. Communal species with strong family bonds. That explained why they pressed together constantly. David looked around his apartment. He had a heating unit for the room, but nothing targeted. No special lights. No live food. He was completely unprepared. The smallest creature made a weak sound, more desperate this time. David made a decision. He grabbed his jacket and went back out into the rain. The colony's commercial district stayed open all night to serve the various species with different sleep schedules. He walked quickly, hoping he remembered correctly. The shop sat between a human restaurant and a Valon medical clinic. Exotic imports, the sign said. David had walked past it 100 times without going inside. He pushed through the door. The interior smelled like a dozen different worlds mixed together. Tanks lined the walls, filled with creatures David did not recognize. A tall being with gray skin and forearms stood behind the counter. Some species David had never bothered to learn. "Help you?" The being's voice was polite but surprised. "Probably few humans came here. I need." David paused. This was a mistake. He should leave. "I need supplies for Drask hatchlings. Young ones. Very young." The being's expression changed. All four arms stopped moving. "You have Drask young?" "3 of them. Found them abandoned. They are cold and will not eat. How young?" "I do not know. Small. Maybe this big." David held his hands apart. The being made a sound like humming. "That is very young. Too young to be away from parents. They will die without proper care." "That is why I am here," David said. His patience was thin. "Can you help or not?" The being studied him for a long moment. Then it moved down the counter and started pulling items from shelves. Heat lamp, special bulbs, a container of live insects, a bag of frozen small animals, supplements, instructions printed on paper. "Expensive," the being said, naming a price that would take most of David's next payment. David pulled out his credit chip without arguing. The being processed the payment and packed everything into a bag. "You are human," the being said while working. "Caring for Drask young. This is unusual." "Everything about tonight is unusual," David replied. "They will bond to you. Drask young imprint on primary caregiver, even if not same species. You understand?" David did not understand. He took the bag anyway. "Thanks." He walked back through the rain carrying supplies for creatures he had tried to hate. The universe had a strange sense of humor. Back in his apartment, the 3 hatchlings had not moved far. They looked weaker. David worked quickly, following the printed instructions. He set up the heat lamp on an old chair, angling it toward the floor. He created a space underneath with blankets. He picked up each hatchling carefully and placed them under the warmth. The change was immediate. They stopped shaking. Their scales seemed to brighten slightly. The biggest one made a happy clicking sound. Next came food. David opened the container of insects. They crawled around inside, very much alive. He felt disgusted but forced himself to grab one. He held it near the biggest hatchling's mouth. The creature's head snapped forward faster than David expected. It caught the insect and swallowed. Then it looked at him expectantly, wanting more. David fed all 3 until they stopped accepting food. The smallest one ate less than the others but managed a few insects. Its breathing sounded rough. Concerning, but better than before. With the hatchling settled under the heat lamp, David sat back against his wall. His body ached from the double shift and the stress. His mind spun with questions he could not answer. Why had he saved them? Why did he care if they lived? They were the same species that had helped kill his friends. He should feel nothing. But watching them curl together under the warmth, making soft content sounds, he felt something. Not happiness exactly. Not peace. Just a small crack in the ice that had frozen his heart. The smallest one crawled out from under the lamp and moved toward him. It climbed onto his leg with surprising determination. Its tiny claws pricked through his pants but did not hurt. It looked up at him and made a questioning chirp. David reached down slowly. The hatchling did not run. He touched its head again. It pressed into his hand and made that clicking sound. Then it settled on his leg and closed its eyes. The other two watched from under the lamp. The biggest one tilted its head, curious. The middle one stayed curled up, still not looking well. David sat very still, afraid to move and disturb the small creature sleeping on his leg. Outside, rain continued falling on New Perth Colony. Inside, something impossible was happening. A broken soldier who had wanted to die alone was learning to keep something alive. He did not know if he could do it. He did not know if they would survive. He only knew that for the first time in 2 years, he would not spend the night counting ceiling cracks. He had something else to do now, something that needed him. The feeling was strange and uncomfortable and terrifying. He did not push it away. 3 weeks changed everything. David's apartment no longer looked like the home of a man waiting to die. The heating lamp stayed on constantly, bathing one corner in warm yellow light. Climbing structures made from old equipment filled the space. His research notes covered the walls, mapping everything he learned about Drask biology. The hatchlings had grown. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The biggest one, which David had started calling Pip in his mind, now measured twice the size of his hand. Pip explored everything, knocked things over, and chirped loudly when hungry. Fearless and bold. The middle one, Nova, had recovered from whatever sickness had gripped her. She watched everything with intelligent eyes and learned quickly. She figured out how to open the cooling unit on her second day. David had to install a lock. The smallest one, Runt, still struggled. His breathing made a slight whistling sound. He ate less than the others and tired easily, but he had a fierce spirit that kept him fighting. When his siblings pushed him away from food, he pushed back harder. David had missed 4 therapy appointments. Dr. Patel left messages he did not answer. He skipped them not from depression, but from something else. He rushed home after work, eager to check on the hatchlings. The feeling was so foreign he barely recognized it. Purpose. His co-workers noticed the change. Briggs mentioned that David smiled when he thought no one watched. David had not realized he was smiling. The observation bothered him less than it should have, but problems were growing along with the hatchlings. His landlord Chen left a notice on his door about noise complaints. The hatchlings chirped and clicked constantly now, especially Pip. The thin walls hid nothing. Money was also becoming an issue. The hatchlings ate more each day. Live insects cost more than David's food budget. He started skipping meals to afford their supplements. On a day off, David made a difficult decision. He needed proper help. The veterinarian at the exotic shop had mentioned Drask merchants in the alien quarter. David had avoided that part of the colony since arriving. Now he had no choice. The alien quarters sprawled across the old industrial district, full of businesses catering to non-human residents. David walked through streets where he was the minority. Every face reminded him of species he had fought against or fought beside. His shoulder ached with phantom pain. He found the market Tala ran in a converted warehouse. The space hummed with activity. Vendors sold everything from food to technology. Smells from a dozen worlds mixed in the air. David pushed through the crowd, drawing stares. Tala's stall sat near the back, marked by cages of live insects and small animals. The Drask merchant was female, her scales a deep green that shifted to blue when she noticed David approaching. Surprise color, he remembered from his research. Human, she said. Her voice was rough but not unfriendly. Unusual customer for my stock. I need advice, David said. He forced the words out. About caring for Drask young. Tala's scales shifted through several colors rapidly. Shock, curiosity, concern. You have Drask hatchlings? 3 of them. Found them abandoned. 1 is sick. I am doing my best, but I do not know enough. Tala set down the container she was holding. Show me pictures. David pulled out his datapad. He had started taking photos to track their growth. Tala studied each image carefully, her scales rippling with colors David could not interpret. These are at least 2 months old, she said finally, past first imprint stage. They have bonded to you. What does that mean? Drask young bond to primary caregiver in first weeks of life. Creates permanent attachment. You are their parent now, by their understanding. Even if biological parent appeared, they would resist separation. David felt something cold in his stomach. I did not know. Clearly, Tala studied him. Why does human care for Drask young? Especially human with military bearing. I see how you stand. How you scan room for exits. You fought in war. Yes. Against my people. Yes. Tala's scales darkened. Not anger, sadness. And now you raise our young. Universe has strange sense of balance. David said nothing. He had no defense and no explanation that made sense. Tala sighed, a very human sound. The small one, you call him Runt. He has respiratory infection, common in young ones exposed to cold. He needs medicine. She wrote something on a piece of paper. Take this to Dr. Moss, Valon Doctor 3 streets over. Tell her I sent you. She will help. Thank you, David said. The words felt inadequate. Human. Tala stopped him as he turned to leave. What you do is not small thing. Drask value children above all else. Raising young of another species is highest honor in our culture. Even if you meant none of this, even if you act only from guilt or loneliness, you give them chance at life. That matters. David left before she could see his face. Her words cut through defenses he had built carefully. He was not doing anything honorable. He was just trying to keep 3 helpless creatures alive because he could not bear to watch more death. But maybe that was enough. Dr. Moss's clinic smelled like antiseptic and something floral David could not identify. The Valon doctor resembled a large insect with multiple eyes and delicate limbs. She examined the photos of Runt with professional focus. Bring him tomorrow, she said in musical voice. I treat him. Also need examine other 2. Make sure they healthy. How much? David asked. Dr. Moss named a price that made his chest tight. He nodded anyway. He would find the money somewhere. Take extra shifts, sell more things. Whatever necessary. The next evening, David carried all 3 hatchlings to the clinic in a modified container with air holes. They chirped nervously during the walk. Pip tried to climb out twice. Nova pressed against the container wall, watching everything. Runt huddled in the middle, his breathing rough. Dr. Moss examined each one thoroughly. She listened to their hearts, checked their scales, tested their reflexes. She gave Runt an injection that made him squeak in protest. He will improve, Dr. Moss said, but needs medicine daily for 2 weeks. I show you how to give it. She demonstrated with a small device. Other 2 are healthy. You do good job caring for them. The words should not have mattered. David told himself they did not. But something warm spread through his chest anyway. Over the next 2 weeks, David fell into a routine. Work at the recycling center. Rush home to feed and care for the hatchlings. Administer Runt's medicine while Pip and Nova tried to steal it, thinking it was food. Research more about Drask development. Sleep for a few hours, repeat. His therapy appointment notification kept appearing on his datapad. Finally, he answered it. Dr. Patel scheduled him for the following week. When he arrived at her office, she stared at him for a long moment. You look different. Different how? Alive, she said simply. You look alive again. What changed? David had not planned to tell her, but the words came anyway. He explained finding the hatchlings, taking them in, learning to care for them. The whole strange, impossible situation. Dr. Patel listened without interrupting. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. Do you understand what you have done? Made a stupid, impulsive decision? No, you have given yourself a reason to live. Something that depends on you. Something that needs you healthy and present. David, this is exactly what we have been working toward. Purpose outside yourself. They are just animals, David said, but the words felt wrong in his mouth. You do not believe that. If you did, you would not have spent half your pay on veterinary care. You would not have covered your walls with research. You would not be here telling me about them with light in your eyes. David wanted to argue, but his therapist was right. The hatchlings had become more than just creatures he was keeping alive. They mattered to him. Their small chirps when he came home mattered. Their growth mattered. Their future mattered. He did not know when the shift had happened. Maybe gradually over 3 weeks, maybe in that first moment when Runt had looked at him with helpless hope, but somewhere along the way he had started caring again, and caring hurt. It was terrifying and exhausting and vulnerable, but it was also the only thing keeping him going. What happens when they grow up? David asked. When they do not need me anymore? Dr. Patel smiled. Then you will have successfully raised 3 living beings. You will have proof that you can protect and nurture, instead of only remembering failure. That is everything, David. That is the whole point. That night, David sat on his floor with all 3 hatchlings. Pip climbed over his legs, chasing his own tail. Nova investigated his jacket pockets, looking for hidden treats. Runt curled up against his side, breathing easier now that the medicine was working. David put his hand on Runt's back. The small hatchling made a content clicking sound. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the colony. Inside, 3 impossible creatures trusted him completely. He did not understand how this had become his life. But for the first time since the war ended, he did not want to change it. David came home to find his apartment door open. His blood went cold. The handle hung loose, lock broken. He pushed the door wide and stepped inside, his body moving on old combat instincts. Clear the corners. Check for threats. Assess the situation. The apartment looked ransacked. His research notes scattered across the floor. The heating lamp knocked over but still working. And standing in the middle of his living space was a Drask adult, nearly 7 feet tall, scales dark with rage. The 3 hatchlings huddled behind David's overturned chair. Pip chirped frantically. Nova had her small claws extended. Runt wheezed with stress. All 3 looked terrified. David stepped between them and the adult. He had no weapon, no plan. But every protective instinct he had developed over 3 months screamed one message: nothing touches them. The adult Drask's scales rippled with dark reds and blacks. Fury colors, his yellow eyes fixed on David with predator focus. Where did you get my children? Children, not hatchlings, not creatures. His actual children. David's mind raced. I found them. Abandoned in a shipping container. They were dying. Liar. The Drask took a step forward. David stood his ground even though his heart hammered. They were stolen from me. Taken with their mother. I have searched 3 months. And I find them with a human. The word human dripped with venom. David understood. This being blamed his whole species for whatever had happened. Fair enough. David had done the same with Drask. I did not steal them, David said carefully. I work at the recycling center. Found them scheduled for incineration. They were cold and starving. I took them home. Human expects me to believe he saved Drask young out of kindness? The adult's claws extended. During war, your kind killed my people. Burned our colonies. And now you steal our children? Look at them, David said. He did not raise his voice. Stay calm. De-escalate. Look at their condition. They are healthy. Well-fed. I have medical records from Dr. Moss. I have purchase records from Tala's market. I did not steal them. I saved them. The Drask's eyes flicked to the hatchlings. His scales shifted slightly, confusion mixing with anger. Runt made a soft clicking sound. A sound David recognized. The same sound he made when David came home from work. The adult went very still. They know you. I have cared for them for 3 months. Fed them, kept them warm, treated Runt's respiratory infection. David's voice steadied. I did not know they were yours. I did not know anyone was looking. I just knew they would die if I did nothing. The Drask stared at him. Long moment of silence. Outside, a transport flew past. Inside, 3 small lives hung in balance. My name is Shen, the adult said finally. His voice was rough with emotion. My mate Vera and I had 4 eggs. Smugglers attacked our home, killed Vara, took the eggs. I tracked them across 2 systems. Found 3 eggs destroyed. Thought all my children were dead. David felt something crack in his chest. Different kind of pain than his own grief. Sympathy. I am sorry. Sorry. Shen's scales darkened again. Human says sorry. As if word means anything. You are right. It does not. David took a careful breath. But I have cared for them. Whatever you believe about humans, whatever I believe about Drask, they are alive because I found them. That has to count for something. Shen moved suddenly. David tensed, ready for attack. But the Drask walked past him to the hatchlings. He knelt down, making himself smaller. He made a series of clicks and chirps, a language David did not know. Pip responded immediately. He crawled forward, chirping excitedly. Nova followed more cautiously. But Runt stayed back, pressing against the chair. He looked at Shen, then at David. His small body trembled. Shen reached for Runt. The small hatchling scrambled away and ran to David. He climbed David's leg with desperate speed and buried his face against David's chest. His breathing came fast and frightened. The room went very quiet. Shen's scales shifted through dozens of colors: shock, hurt, confusion. He stared at his smallest child clinging to a human instead of him. "He does not know me. He was very sick when I found him," David said softly. He put his hand on Runt's back, trying to calm him. "I gave him medicine every day. Stayed up nights when he could not breathe. He bonded to me. I did not plan it. I did not even want it. But it happened." Shen stood slowly. He looked at Pip and Nova, who had approached him but kept glancing back at David. "They all bonded to you." Tala said it was permanent. "First weeks of life create attachment." Tala, the market vendor. Shen's voice was hollow. "She knew. She must have seen you buying supplies. She did not tell me. She probably did not know you were looking. New Perth has thousands of Drask." Shen turned to David. His scales had gone pale gray, grief color. "You understand what you have done? You are their parent now. By Drask biology and culture. Even though I am their blood father, they see you as primary caregiver." David understood. The weight of it settled on his shoulders. "What happens now?" "Law says they are mine. I have biological claim. But culture says forcing separation from bonded parent causes severe trauma." Shen's claws clenched. "I have choice. Take my children and damage them, or leave them with human who stole them." "I did not steal them," David repeated, firmer this time. "No, you saved them." Shen's scales rippled. "Which is somehow worse. I should hate you, want to kill you, but you gave my children chance to live. How do I repay that? How do I punish that?" Runt made a soft sound against David's chest. Pip chirped and climbed onto David's shoulder. Nova sat between them, looking confused. David looked at this grieving father, saw his own pain reflected back, both of them broken by war and loss, both of them trying to protect what little they had left. "There might be another option," David said slowly. The idea formed as he spoke. "What if we both raised them?" Shen's eyes narrowed. "Explain. They need you. You are their biological father. They should know their culture, their language, their heritage. But they also bonded to me. Separating us will hurt them." David swallowed hard. "What if we found a way to co-parent? Together. Human and Drask. Raising children together." Shen's tone suggested David had proposed flying without a ship. "Yes. I know it is unusual. I know it goes against every instinct we both have. But look at them." David gestured to the 3 hatchlings. "They do not care about our politics or our histories. They just need parents who will protect them. Can we put them first?" Shen was quiet for a long time. He looked at his children, at David, at the apartment filled with heating lamps and climbing structures and medical supplies. "Evidence of care, evidence of commitment. I tracked the smugglers to this colony," Shen said finally. "They are still operating, still stealing eggs, still destroying families. I came here to find my children and stop the operation." "Then we have a common goal," David said. "Protect these 3. Stop the people who hurt them. Everything else we can figure out as we go." Shen's scales shifted to a pale blue. David did not know that color. "You would work with Drask? After what we did in the war? You would work with human? After what we did in the war?" They stared at each other. 2 fathers from enemy species. 2 broken people trying to do right by 3 small lives. The situation was absurd and complicated and probably doomed to failure. "1-month trial," Shen said. "We try your plan. If it does not work, I take them home to Drask World." "Agreed?" David wanted to argue. Wanted to say no. Wanted to keep his safe isolated bubble. But he looked at Pip and Nova and Runt. They deserved better than what either father could give alone. "Agreed." Shen's scales lightened slightly. "Then we start now. I need to teach you proper Drask child rearing. You do everything wrong. I kept them alive for 3 months. Barely. Their climbing structures are poorly balanced. Heat lamp is wrong spectrum, and you feed them too many insects and not enough protein variation." David felt his jaw tighten. "They seem healthy to me." "Because you have no proper standards for comparison." Shen moved to the heating lamp and adjusted it. "This angle is better." "And tomorrow we purchase proper equipment. I cannot afford proper equipment. I have funds." "I also have knowledge. You have bonding and time. Between us, maybe they have chance." David wanted to argue more. but Runt climbed down from his chest and moved cautiously toward Shen. The small hatchling sniffed the adult's hand, then made a soft questioning sound. Shen's scales brightened with colors David had never seen: joy, wonder, relief. He touched his son's head gently with one claw. "Hello, little one. I am your father. Your first father. This human is your second father." "Strange as that is," Runt looked back at David as if checking. David nodded. "It is all right. He is family." Runt accepted this. He climbed onto Shen's arm and made happy clicking sounds. David watched Drask father reunite with Drask's son. Something impossible was happening in his small apartment. Something that should not work but might anyway. Outside, smugglers operated freely. Inside, an unlikely alliance formed over 3 small lives. David did not know if they could make it work. He only knew they had to try. For Pip and Nova and Runt. For the chance that broken people could build something good together. For the hope that maybe caring about someone else's child could help heal your own losses. It was a strange kind of family, but it was family nonetheless. 2 weeks of partnership taught David that Shen was stubborn, proud, and completely right about most things related to raising Drask young. The apartment had transformed again. Proper UV lamps replaced David's basic heating setup. Climbing structures now featured materials that helped shed old scales. The food variety had expanded to include things David never knew existed. The hatchlings thrived. Pip had grown bold enough to try climbing the walls. Nova had learned to open every container in the apartment. Runt still wheezed sometimes, but his energy had doubled. All 3 responded to commands in both human speech and Drask clicks, but the smuggling investigation had stalled. Shen had tracked the operation to an industrial complex on the colony's edge. David used his recycling center access to scout the area. They found evidence: shipping manifests with falsified codes, containers marked for off-world transport, but no direct proof. No way to shut it down legally. Then Tala sent an urgent message. She had information. They needed to meet. David and Shen left the hatchlings with Dr. Moss, who had become part of their strange extended family. The 3 protested loudly. Pip tried to follow them out the door. Nova hissed at being left behind. Runt made pitiful whimpering sounds. "We will return soon," Shen told them in Drask. "Stay with Dr. Moss, be good." David added, "Listen to her. No climbing things you should not climb." He looked pointedly at Pip, who chirped innocently. The market district buzzed with evening activity. Tala's stall was closed, but she waited nearby, her scales rippling with distress colors. "Inside, quickly." She led them to a back room David had never seen. The space was filled with communication equipment and data screens. Tala was more than a simple merchant. "I am part of Network," she explained. "We track smuggling operations. Try to help victims. But this ring is bigger than we thought. They have protection. Colony officials on payroll. Security forces that look away." "How big?" David asked. Tala pulled up files on her screen. Images appeared, containers, transport ships, and dozens of photos of hatchlings and eggs. Too many to count. They have been operating for 5 years. Started small. Grew when they learned authorities would not investigate alien crimes seriously. Humans think of it as exotic pet trade. Just animals. But these are children. Families destroyed. Entire bloodlines ended. Shen's scales went dark. His claws extended involuntarily. "Where is the main facility?" "Warehouse 16 in the industrial sector. But it is heavily guarded. My network cannot get inside. We need official investigation. Need proof that forces them to act." David studied the screens. His military training kicked in automatically. "What kind of security?"
"Armed guards."
"Patrol drones. Sealed entrances. They move shipments every 3 days. Next transport is tomorrow night. We need to get inside," Shen said. "Get evidence." "Something undeniable." "Suicide," Tala replied. "They shoot intruders. Claim self-defense. No questions asked." David saw the layout in his mind. Entry points. Guard rotations. Weak spots in the security grid. He had planned operations like this before. Led troops into hostile territory. But that was years ago. He was different now. Broken. Except maybe he was not as broken as he thought. "I can get us in," David said quietly. "I know that sector. Recycling center has access tunnels under the industrial complex. Maintenance routes. If we time it right, we can enter below their security perimeter." Shen looked at him. This is dangerous. Not just for us. If we fail, if they discover us, they will move operation. Evidence will disappear. Then we do not fail, David replied. His heart was pounding, but his voice stayed steady. We get in. Document everything. Get out. Send evidence to every authority we can reach. Force them to act. Tala's scales shifted to worried yellow. You would risk this? For children not even your species? David thought of Pip climbing his legs. Nova stealing his food. Runt sleeping against his chest. They are my family. All of them. The 3 we raise and the dozens still trapped. I will not let more families be destroyed. Shen's scales brightened. Respect, Color. We do this together. As partners. They planned through the night. Tala provided equipment, cameras, recording devices, maps of the complex. David sketched out routes and timing. Shen memorized guard patterns and security codes Tala's network had gathered. The next evening arrived too quickly. David and Shen visited the hatchlings before the operation. All 3 sensed something was wrong. They clung more than usual. Made worried sounds. We will be back, David promised. He held Runt, who wheezed against his neck. I will always come back. Shen touched each hatchling's head, speaking soft words in Drask. Nova climbed onto his shoulder and refused to let go. He gently pried her loose and handed her to Dr. Moss. If something happens to us, Shen said to the doctor, these 3 are yours. Care for them. Nothing will happen, Dr. Moss replied firmly. You will return. And I will have lecture prepared about being reckless fools. They left before the hatchlings could protest more. The recycling center stood dark and empty. David's badge still worked. He led Shen through familiar corridors to the maintenance access. The tunnels beneath smelled like mold and chemicals. Emergency lights cast dim blue illumination. They moved in silence. David's body remembered old training. Stay low, watch for threats. Trust your partner. Shen moved with predator grace, his scales adapting to shadow colors. The tunnel led to a junction point beneath Warehouse 16. David checked his scanner. No movement above. He pried open the access panel carefully. They climbed up into a storage room filled with shipping containers. And then David heard it. Chirping. Dozens of small voices crying out. The sound made his chest ache. They moved between containers, recording everything. Each box held eggs or young hatchlings from different species. Drask Valon. Species David did not recognize. All stolen. All suffering. Shen found containers with dead hatchlings inside. Casualties of bad storage. Negligence. His scales went black with rage. David put a hand on his shoulder. Evidence first. Justice after. They documented everything. Shipping manifests. Financial records left on a desk. Photos of every container. The guards were outside, unaware of intruders. Then Pip appeared on a security screen David was photographing. No, not Pip, but a hatchling that looked exactly like him. Same size, same markings. Trapped in a container marked for shipment to a private collector on a distant world. Pip's sibling. Shen whispered. His voice broke. The 4th egg. I thought it was destroyed. David's hand shook as he took photos. 4 eggs. Shen had 4 eggs. 3 became Pip, Nova, and Runt, and the 4th was here, waiting to be sold. We are getting it out, David said. No question. No debate. We came for evidence, not rescue, Shen replied. But his claws were already opening the container. The small hatchling inside looked weak, malnourished. It made pitiful sounds when light hit its eyes. Shen picked it up carefully, making soothing clicks. The hatchling responded. Knew its father's voice even after months of separation. We take evidence and we take this child, David said. Non-negotiable. Alarms suddenly blared. Red lights flashed. They had been discovered. David grabbed the data drives with evidence. Shen held the rescued hatchling against his chest. They ran back toward the access tunnel. Behind them, doors crashed open. Voices shouted. Guards poured in. The tunnel entrance was ahead. 20 meters, 15, 10. Weapons fire cracked through the warehouse. A shot grazed David's shoulder. Pain bloomed, but he kept running. Shen stumbled. David caught him, pulled him forward. They dropped into the tunnel. David sealed the access panel behind them. More gunfire hit metal, but held. They were through. They ran through the tunnels. Behind them, sounds of pursuit. The guards knew these routes too. David's shoulder screamed with pain. Shen's breathing came hard. The hatchling in his arms cried out with each jarring step. There, Shen pointed. Side passage. David turned into it. They found themselves in a dead end. Storage room. No other exit. The footsteps behind them grew closer. David checked his shoulder. Blood soaked his shirt. Not fatal, but bad. He looked at Shen. The Drask's scales were pale. Exhaustion, fear. The evidence, David said. He handed Shen the data drives. You take the hatchling and the data, go back. Find another route. What will you do? Buy you time. David's voice was calm. His mind was clear. This was what he had trained for. I will lead them away. You get that hatchling to safety. You get that evidence to authorities. You raise all 4 children. Promise me. Shen's scales flashed through a dozen colors. You will die. Maybe, maybe not. But those hatchlings need their father. Both fathers. If I do not make it, you tell them I love them. You tell them their human father kept his promise. He came back. David moved before Shen could argue. He exited the storage room and ran in the opposite direction, making noise. Shouting, drawing attention. Behind him, he heard guards change direction. Following him. Away from Shen. He ran through the tunnels, his shoulder bleeding, his breath burning. He thought of 3 small faces. Pip's fearless eyes. Nova's clever mind. Runt's determined spirit. He had promised to come back. He intended to keep that promise if he could. The tunnel opened ahead into the recycling center. David burst through. Behind him, guards emerged. 5 of them, armed, angry. David turned to face them. He had no weapon, no backup. Just determination and the memory of 3 hatchlings who needed him. He smiled. If this was how it ended, at least he had learned to care again. At least he had found family. At least he had fought for something that mattered. The guards raised their weapons. Then lights blazed from above. A voice boomed through speakers. Drop your weapons. You are surrounded. This is colony security. The guards froze. More lights. A dozen security officers emerged from doorways. The head officer stepped forward, weapon trained on the smugglers. We received anonymous tip, the officer said, complete with evidence of your operation. You are all under arrest. David sank to his knees. Relief crashed over him like a wave. Tala. It had to be Tala. She had sent security the moment they were discovered. Gave them time to arrive. The guards were restrained. Medics appeared. One of them worked on David's shoulder. You are lucky, she said. Clean through. You will be fine, David laughed. Actually laughed. Lucky. Yes, he was lucky. He had found family in the strangest place. He had learned to live again. He had kept his promise. Shen appeared from a side entrance, still holding the 4th hatchling. His scales showed relief and joy. All 4, he said. Finally. All 4, David smiled. Let us go home. 6 months after the warehouse raid. David stood on the porch of a house he never imagined owning. The property sat on the outskirts of New Perth Colony, where land was cheap and neighbors were sparse. Perfect for a family that made more noise than regulations usually allowed. The yard stretched wide, dotted with climbing structures of various sizes. Young beings of a dozen different species played in the afternoon sun. David watched Pip chase a Valon juvenile across the grass. Both were laughing in their own ways. Pip had grown to the size of a large dog now, his scales bright green with health and happiness. He had learned to moderate his fearlessness somewhat. Somewhat. Nova sat under a tree with 3 younger hatchlings, teaching them the Drask language. She had become the unofficial teacher of the group. Her intelligence had developed rapidly. Sometimes David suspected she understood human politics better than he did. Runt was somewhere near the back fence, probably climbing something he should not climb. His respiratory problems had resolved completely. Now he was the most daring of the 4 siblings. The fighter who refused to let his small size stop him. David would check on him in a minute. The 4th sibling, the one they had rescued from the warehouse, had taken longer to recover. Physically and emotionally, Shen had named him Ash for the color of his scales when they found him. Now those scales had brightened to healthy brown. Ash stayed close to Shen most days, making up for lost time with his biological father. Shen emerged from the house carrying a tray of prepared food, raw meat portions sized appropriately for each species, vegetables for the herbivores, supplements for those who needed them. He had become an expert at managing the dietary needs of 24 young beings. Feeding time, Shen called in Drask. Then in human common language, food ready. The yard erupted in motion. Young ones converged from every direction. Organized chaos. David and Shen had learned to handle it through trial and error. Mostly error. The house behind them was technically called the New Perth Rehabilitation Center for Displaced Youth, officially funded by the Galactic Union after David's testimony, unofficially known as the place where the human and Drask raise everyone's unwanted children. It started with the 4 hatchlings. Then Tala brought 2 Valon orphans whose parents died in the war. Then Dr. Moss asked if they could take a young being whose species David still could not pronounce. Then colony services started referring cases, and David found himself unable to say no. Each child had a story. Each one had been abandoned, orphaned, or rescued from trafficking. Each one needed somewhere safe. Someone who cared. David and Shen provided both. "You are thinking too much again," Shen said, appearing beside David. "I can see it in your face." "Just remembering," David replied. "A year ago I counted ceiling cracks and wanted to die. Now I spend my days preventing young Valon from eating toxic plants and breaking up territorial disputes between species that should not coexist." "And you are happy," David considered. Happy was not quite the right word. Fulfilled, maybe. Purposeful. Exhausted. Terrified most days that he would fail these young ones. "But yes, underneath all that, something like happiness, I am alive," he said finally. "That is enough." Dr. Patel visited once a week now. Not as his therapist, as the center's official psychological consultant. She evaluated new arrivals and helped develop care plans. But she also checked on David, though she tried to be subtle. Today she arrived with a young human soldier. The soldier looked familiar in ways that hurt. Hollow eyes, tense shoulders, the bearing of someone who had seen too much and lost too much. "David, this is Andrew," Dr. Patel said. "He recently received medical discharge. I thought perhaps he could volunteer here, if you are looking for help." David understood immediately. Another broken veteran, another person who needed purpose. He had been exactly where Andrew stood. "We always need help," David said. He gestured at the yard full of young beings. "Fair warning. It is chaos. They are loud. Some of them bite. You will be exhausted and frustrated and covered in strange substances by the end of each day." "Sounds better than my current situation," Andrew replied. His voice was rough, unused to talking. "Then you start tomorrow, 7 in the morning. Bring patience and thick gloves." Andrew nodded and left with Dr. Patel. Shen watched them go. "You take in every broken thing," says the Drask who adopted a human as co-parent. Shen's scales flashed with amusement colors. Their friendship had evolved into something neither of them expected. Partnership. Brotherhood. A bond forged by shared purpose and mutual respect. They still argued constantly about child-rearing techniques, but they trusted each other completely. "Colony Council wants to visit next week," Shen said. "Formal inspection. They bring news reporters and Galactic Union representatives." David groaned. "Politics and politics that fund this place. Politics that allow us to continue." Shen's scales shifted to serious blue. "We are becoming model program. Other colonies request advice on starting similar centers. You are famous now. Human who loves alien children." "I hate that title. Better than broken soldier who wanted to die." "Fair point." Runt appeared from around the house, climbing on top of a storage shed. He chirped triumphantly. David started toward him, ready to order him down before he got hurt. But Pip got there first, climbing up to join his smaller brother. Together they surveyed their territory. Nova and Ash joined David and Shen on the porch. Both had grown enough to reach David's waist now. Nova made a content clicking sound. Ash pressed against Shen's leg. "Your human father worries too much," Shen told them in Drask. "Runt climbs well now. He will not fall." "I understand enough, Drask, to know you are talking about me," David said. "Then you understand I am correct." They stood together, watching their impossible family play in the yard. 4 Drask siblings, 2 fathers from different species, and dozens of young beings from across the galaxy, all learning that family had nothing to do with biology. Later that evening, after the chaos of dinner and bathing and bedtime arguments, David sat in his small office. He was updating records for the Colony Council inspection. Required paperwork that never ended. A soft sound made him look up. All four hatchlings stood in the doorway. They were supposed to be sleeping. Clearly they had other plans. What is wrong? David asked. Pip chirped and climbed onto the desk. The others followed. They arranged themselves around David, close but not restrictive. A drastic comfort behavior Shen had taught him about. Bad dreams? David guessed. Nova clicked affirmatively. David understood. They all had bad dreams sometimes. Memories of cold containers. Separation from parents. The fear before rescue. David set aside his work. Come here. He moved to the small couch in the office. All four climbed up with him. They were getting too big for this, but David did not care. Pip curled against his left side. Nova took his right. Ash settled on his lap. Runt claimed the space on top of the couch back, draping across David's shoulders. You are safe, David said quietly. Both your fathers are here. This is your home. Nothing will take you away. They made content sounds. Their breathing slowed. One by one, they fell asleep. David stayed very still, trapped under sleeping Drask Young. His back would hurt tomorrow. He did not care. This moment mattered more than comfort. Shun found them an hour later. He stood in the doorway, his scales showing soft purple. Love color, they have nightmares, David whispered. I know. I heard them moving. Shen entered and sat in the chair across from the couch. They are lucky children. Two fathers who would die for them. I almost did die for them, but you did not. You lived. You kept promise. You came back. Shen's scales brightened. You gave them everything, safety, family, future. You gave me back my children when I thought they were lost. I do not have words for this debt. No debt, David said. We are partners. Family does not owe debt. Strange human concept. But I begin to understand. Shen stood. I will carry them to bed. You need to finish paperwork. No, let them sleep here tonight. Just tonight, Shen understood. He brought blankets and adjusted the lights. Then he left David alone with the four sleeping hatchlings. David looked at each one. Pip, who taught him courage. Nova, who taught him patience. Runt, who taught him that the smallest fighters are often the strongest. And Ash, who taught him that healing takes time but is always possible. He thought about the man he had been a year ago. Hollow, hateful, ready to die. That man would not recognize this life, would not believe it possible. But it was possible. It was real. And it was worth every difficult moment. The Colony Council visit came. The reporters took their photos. The Galactic Union representatives praised the program. David gave his speech about the importance of cross-species cooperation and rehabilitation through purpose. They stood politely. They applauded. They promised more funding, but the real story happened after they left. When Pip tried to steal food from the new Valon arrivals and had to be taught about sharing. When Nova discovered how to open the communication system and accidentally contacted a transport ship asking for more children. When Runt got stuck on top of the house and refused to admit he needed help getting down. When Ash finally laughed for the first time since his rescue. These moments mattered more than politics, more than publicity, more than anything except the simple fact that broken things could heal together. Andrew, the new volunteer, lasted 3 weeks before asking to stay permanently. David hired him immediately, then hired 2 more veterans who needed purpose. The staff grew, the center expanded, the model spread to other colonies. But it all started with one broken soldier who found 3 dying hatchlings and made an impossible choice. To care, to save, to live. Years later, when reporters asked David why he did it, he never had a good answer. The truth was too simple and too complicated. He saved them because he could not bear to watch more death. He kept them because they needed him. He built this life because they taught him that living was worth the pain. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, David would sit on his porch and watch the sun set over a yard full of young beings from across the galaxy. Pip would be teaching combat techniques to anyone who would listen. Nova would be reading technical manuals way above her age level. Runt would be climbing something dangerous while Ash tried to convince him to be careful. Shen would join him with 2 cups of tea. They would sit in comfortable silence. Brothers in everything but blood. Fathers to dozens who needed them. Proof that hate could be overcome. That enemies could become family. That broken soldiers could learn to build instead of destroy. The universe was strange and complicated and often cruel, but it also offered second chances in unexpected places. To 3 abandoned hatchlings who needed saving. To a Drask father who thought his children were lost. To a broken soldier who thought his life had ended. They had all saved each other. That was the truth beneath everything else. David sipped his tea and smiled. He had stopped counting ceiling cracks. He had better things to count now. 4 dressed young growing strong, 24 others finding their way. 1 impossible family that should not work but did anyway. 1 life rebuilt from ashes and pain, and 3 small chirping voices that refused to let him die. 1 future full of hope.